Okay, let's make some granite rings with ancient Egyptian technology. The best way to stop the drill from slipping at the start is to use a wooden guide such as that. I got some plaster putty blue tack, we call it, to use as mud to seal it down, because you want to keep the abrasive inside. And the principle is a tube inside another tube drill, so we'll be making two drills at once, and this is the ancient Egyptian flywheel drill. After 5 minutes the tracks will begin to appear, though it's best to keep the guide in place, especially for delicate things such as rings. You want to keep the drill as vertical as possible. As you can see here, it wobbles from side to side, and that's not a helpful thing for delicate things such as rings. I'm being very aggressive with the drill because it's only the beginning of it. As we go down, that wobbling, that side to side movement is going to possibly damage the very thin walls of the rings. So later on I'm much more delicate, careful, keeping the drill as vertical as possible. Here I'm just being very aggressive to get the initial cut going. Especially at the start, you want to load it up a bit because it's going to get stuck inside the tube, for instance. It's going to get pushed out a little bit. So a little bit more frequent loading of the abrasive early on. Second major point, if you want symmetrical, what you need to do is either rotate your position around, if it's a big block, you'll move. If it's a smaller block, you're going to rotate it around. And I'm going to start at doing it 90 degrees. I'm going to mix it up a little bit more, because as you're drilling, there's a bias in the drill. When it's spinning around, when it's going away from you, and when you're coming back in, it's like the pedals of a push bike. There's that point, when you're pushing, that's where most of the energy comes in. It's not equal all the way around. So to cancel out that bias, you just rotate the stone or rotate your position around it. Once you're roughly 45% through, what you want to do is extend the innermost tube drill a little bit further out so that it cuts ahead of the rest, and you want it to cut through well before the others do. You only want the others to be roughly 50% cut through, but that central one, you want that all the way through. That'll be a very important feature, because you'll be able to use that guide hole, swap the plate over and drill from the other side. Once you've used that innermost tube drill to cut all the way through, flip the stone over, and now that inner tube is a guide, that hole that goes through. That's not going to be necessary to cut there anymore, but it will provide a guide for the outer two most tube drills to do their work and stop slipping. And then the final step is to just keep drilling all the way through. Then you'll have two rings and a teeny tiny little replica of core 7. And this is the start. Later on I'm going slower with my drilling, and I want to keep that drill as vertical as possible and much more delicate towards the end. But that's the process there. Magical granite rings, nothing to it. Our blanks now, because I drilled from both sides, well, we get so thin that the core fall. So we have this ridge, and this one goes along the middle, as where this one was a little bit off center there, and I showed earlier I'd broken off some bits of the stone to get them nice and thin. But now we have our blanks, and that ridge there in the center, well, you can keep it as a decorative feature. I think that's what I'm going to do. So now it's just a matter of polishing them up. Okay, so that next step is polishing. So on the outside of the rings there's a little bit of chippage because of the way it's very fragile there at the end, and so I just used a piece of sandstone and the outer sides of the ring. I just wanted to grind them down nicely, and well, the sandstone of course will work because sandstone has the same Mohs hardness of granite. It's they're basically each of them are 70% quartz, so even this brittle sandstone is great for grinding on there. But also, because I drilled in from both sides, we have these little ridges there. Now you could just grind them off, but I decided I was going to make little decorative features of those. But as the saying goes, the best laid plans of mice and men. And I got way too aggressive, way too confident at this point. I thought that the hard part was over, but it wasn't the grinding down of the sides that got me. It was a lack of care. As you can see there in the bottom left, the large foot, it just fell off the desk and broke into pieces. Probably if I had carpet there, not a problem, but it fell onto another stone. And so then I was left with only the smaller ring, and then I used a small stone, and I wanted to grind away the inside. I wanted to make the ring very thin. I started with a piece of gold quartz, honey quartz. Quartz has got the same hardness in there, and then the next disaster happened. And that next disaster was I got cocky, and instead of going slower with the harder stone, I thought, okay, I'll get this soft sandstone flakes, because I'll grind down very quickly and fit into the gap, and that worked well. And if I had just been reasonable with that instead of being overly hasty, I really jammed the sandstone in there, thinking, well, it's brittle and soft. And again, this type of work, very delicate, being rough and fast and trying to get the job done quickly, not a good idea, because as you'll see in a moment, I split the ring in two by taking that sandstone shard and just jamming it in there and really like twisting, going back and forth and trying to get the work done quickly rather than get it done right, and snap right around here. Any second now on the bottom right half. Jam it in, twisting around too hard, too aggressive, even though, there you go, and I broke the second ring. But lessons learned. I know what not to do next time, and that's more important than knowing what to do. If you know what not to do, you know why the good things work. And that's a better lesson learned. But anyway, managed the rings, but the final polish, the easy part, is where I let myself down. Cheers, have a good one.